Do you know what art therapy is or where you can even find an art therapist? Hello, I'm Desiree, and I'm currently a graduate student studying psychology with a concentration in therapeutic arts. And every time I tell somebody I'm studying art therapy, they ask me, what is art therapy and what is an art therapist? So I decided to make this short video for you explaining what art therapy is, where you can find art therapists, the typical individuals that an art therapist may work with, some benefits, and just some overall explanation as to why I share with you some awesome therapeutic art resources to help you with your mental health conditions here on this channel. And yes, please excuse my crazy hair, and I do have a little bit of cold or allergies. So if you're picking up on that in my voice, I apologize. But I do have some time in between studying and schoolwork because it seems to never end these days to make this video for you and just talk about what art therapy is, why I'm drawn to it. Maybe you're drawn to it as well. So, what is art therapy? So, art therapy is in the same field as traditional talk therapy. An art therapist is qualified just as your regular therapist. An art therapist is just like your traditional therapist. The difference is an art therapist has additional certifications with using art as a means of communication within therapy. So instead of you coming into my office and we talk about your problems, we can explore your problems through art making. Now, this is a specialized field within specifically psychology and not counseling because there's a lot of research and studies done on how creating art affects the brain, rewires the brain, heals the brain, all that stuff. So art therapy is connected to psychology, and psychology is heavily connected to neurology and uses a lot of other sciences as well, just to support its findings within the scientific research and community. Okay, let's talk about who might be exposed to or who might be working with an art therapist within your community. There's three specific populations. When I say populations, I mean a specific group of individuals that may benefit the most from art therapy. The primary population of individuals that work with art therapists are children who have developmental issues. So this is for children that have intellectual disabilities. A lot of children who have autism most likely will encounter an art therapist or somebody that has some kind of certification within art. And the primary reason why children with developmental issues or physical issues and disabilities, mental disabilities, severely impacted children because they have communication issues. So autistic children are considered to be nonverbal. They talk later on in childhood. So you can just imagine a child that has communication issues, how this comes up in their life. Like they can't communicate with their parents, they can't communicate with their peers, they can't communicate with their teachers. So there comes a lot of issues. These children already are more prone to act out in certain ways. So what an art therapist will do is come in and try to alleviate some of these symptoms that the child is feeling. And art is really great for children because they're more just open and creative anyway and adapt to it more open. But what art then, or creating art then becomes a way of communicating, right? Like exploring different things that maybe the child can't necessarily say to their parent, but they have a cognitive framework and understanding in their own worldview of what they're experiencing and what they're sensing in their world. So art becomes kind of like this key component to try to understand what the child is going through, what they're experiencing, instead of just ignoring the fact that they have their own experience in life. Just because they can't talk doesn't mean that they can't express that and get their needs met. So that's where art comes in and proves to be an additional supporting factor in treatment for children with severe disabilities or children that are experiencing some developmental issues but may later grow out of it, such as autism. So an autistic child, doesn't need an art therapist like their whole life. They just needed a little bit of support during those early developmental years where communication becomes difficult for them. So that's one major population that you might find an art therapist working. Another population that is also exposed to art therapy and therapeutic arts is the elderly population. Sometimes elderly individuals also experience some physical limitations. They're more prone to falls, Alzheimer's, dementia. So again, language becomes like this barrier for some individuals as they get older, just because of cognitive decline or stroke, another disability, or any kind of other condition. And then the third population that is exposed to an art therapist would be an individual that is involved in a community outreach program. So when I say community outreach program, I am talking about individuals that are experiencing trauma, domestic violence, maybe some homelessness, but community programs are the individuals that are really struggling to find housing and support. So they're relying on their community. And art therapy, there's so many studies how art therapy is really helpful with trauma because creating art in very specific ways rewires the brain, which helps individuals who experience trauma tell their stories. So whenever a person experiences trauma and they're in that state, a part of their brain shuts off, and the part of the brain that shuts off is the verbal part of it. So a lot of times when we're working with individuals trauma related mental health issues, the retelling of their story or getting that story out is a very important part of therapy. And when that part of your brain is shut off because you're experiencing trauma, what ends up happening is that the person has a very difficult time retelling their story. But again, one of the most effective ways of helping someone overcome their trauma and managing their trauma symptoms is to get that story out. But that story is hard to get out or to replay for various reasons. There is something, if you want to look it up, it's called wet therapy. So it's writing and expressive therapy. It's associated with art therapy, even though it's writing. But essentially, it's set up where the individual who experienced trauma is involved in a deep, intense progr- group program that can be like 12 different sessions. And then each of these sessions are strategically designed to help the individual go through like one step to a next step to a next step to a next step. So technically, that's where we see if you have a lot of trauma, where art therapy comes into place. If you wanted to use art therapy on your own, you can do that. It's just called therapeutic art. So technically, you can't do art therapy on yourself. You have to work with someone to get the benefits. But like I said, you can engage in what we call therapeutic arts, which is just art making for satisfaction to improve your mood because it does work. So I think that's it. This video is a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. But that's art therapy in a sense. And if you're a creative person, check out my Jungian art therapy videos, DesireeClemens.com. It's my blog, interesting things there. Check it out. Subscribe, like this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.